here. Okay.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a pair of lips that I've lost in the moment. All I want is for you to come back. Now I'm caught in the middle of life, and I
Everyone, and welcome again to the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and we have a distinguished guest once again on the platform, former Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, our recurring guest, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. How are you doing, sir?
Great, Rashid. And you?
I'm doing pretty good, but I got to pick your head now, Mr. Roberts. On every issue, it seems that Donald Trump is flip-flopped, whether it's with the Epstein files or whether it's with the Ukrainian conflict. He's splitting his base. What is going on? Is he being properly advised, or is this all Donald Trump?
I kind of think it's all Donald Trump. Well, it's kind of gotten him in trouble. You made a reference to his base, and a lot of it is dissatisfied because he's spending so much time in foreign affairs, overseas, and dealing with problems of other countries, rather than what his base thinks are our numerous problems at home.
Mhm.
And this pressure has finally gotten to him. It's been transmitted to him by his government and by the pollsters. And apparently they're concerned about the Republicans losing the midterm elections, and that would bring the end of any Trump programs because the Democrats would be able to block him in the House and Senate. And so he's apparently, for now, heeded this advice or this information and is trying to wrap up the Ukrainian situation, get that over with. After all, it hasn't quite been a year since he's been in office, but it's been longer than the 24 hours that he promised to end that conflict. I have no idea why he ever made such a silly promise, but so he has apparently completely flip-flopped on his position about Ukraine. I have briefly looked at his 28 or 29 points. John Helmer and also Gilbert Doctorow report that they are essentially Putin's points. So that as I had said recently in podcasts, that the two sides, Trump and Putin, you couldn't be reconciled because Trump was demanding an immediate ceasefire with no indication of what the ultimate agreement would be. And Putin was demanding some sort of long-term security agreement that would increase the security of Russia from having NATO all over its borders. And these are not reconcilable. And I said they're not going to go anywhere unless one side or the other abandons their position. Well, it looks like Trump has done that. he's abandoned the position, which is a good thing because it was an irrational and stupid position. But he did it because of the pressure from his base to come home and deal with our problems. And the only way out for him was to accept the Russian position. So I'll know more about it by the end of the day or tomorrow when I get through going through all of these points and comparing them to Putin's 31 points.
Mm-hmm.
I did notice in some of the points, it seems they leave the situation not fully resolved. And so they could easily break down and lead to a renewal of, of the violence. There's another problem in Trump's 28 or 29 points. I forget now the exact number. But and it is they're going to use the $300 billion of frozen Russian central bank reserves to rebuild Ukraine. So it wasn't clear to me why the Russians had to pay for rebuilding Ukraine. It was a war started by the United States and kept going by the US and Europe. So if Ukraine's to be rebuilt, it should be US and the EU that rebuilds it, not the Russian money. I don't know how the Russians will feel about that. They may think, well, it's cheaper than continuing the war. I don't know. I have seen some statements by Russian war analysts, and they say, "Look, we're winning this war. We're not giving up anything.
Mm-hmm.
The Ukraine's collapsing. We could take the whole country." And so I don't know how it will play inside Russia. My first impression of these points, which, if Dr. O and Helmer are right, kind of mimic Putin's points. My first impression is it's a victory for the Russian liberals, the Atlanticist integrationists, because one of its points is Russia is to be reintegrated into the Western economy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know that that's in Russia's interest, because it subjects them again to being sanctioned, to being punished if somehow they displease another American president. Whereas if they stay with the BRICS, then that's their show. And so there are many points that would have to be worked out between Putin and the liberals in Russia and the nationalists. Now, the deal that Trump's offered, it can't please the American military security complex because if the war winds down, the profits wind down.
Mm-hmm.
And the neoconservatives are already damning Trump for this concession to Putin to resolve the conflict, and they will outlast Trump. I mean, they're institutionalized. They're not subject to term limits or of the 4 years, and so they will probably continue to work to overturn any agreement that's made or to cause problems with any of the points. So I don't think that it's all over and done with. But I do think Trump is pressured to end it so he can claim another victory and come home and deal with the problems. We'll see. In other words, the main reason for suddenly making an accommodation with the Russians on their terms to settle the conflict is not to settle the conflict, but to get Trump out of trouble. And so you don't know how sincere or lasting something done for immediate political effect will be. It will help Trump, but whether or not reaching an agreement like that is lasting is hard to know.
Could it be that he's offering this deal, which mimics what Russia offered earlier, but the battleground situation has changed and it's changed so dramatically that maybe this now Trump is trying to go back into the grab bag to try to get this deal that he rejected at first, because now Russia is in such a strong position, because with or without the deal they can take these areas now, and the financial situation is becoming more tenuous with Ukraine's European backers. And also, before you answer that, it's a 2-point question about the money, about taking Russia's money to rebuild Ukraine, which is ludicrous. The victor has to rebuild. But could it be that they put that in there because they've already stolen the money, and they're saying, well, we will reintegrate you into the Western system so that the Western financial system won't be exposed the way it would be if Russia say, that no, that's not it. You stole this money, blah, blah, blah. Could those be points?
Certainly, yeah. And your point about they've already stolen the money, that could, in other words, it's not frozen, it's already in their pockets. I wouldn't be surprised. I think the difficulty on the Russian side will be with the nationalists, because among Trump's 28 points is the requirement that outside of Donbass, where Russia is occupying territory but has not yet taken all of the territory that it has already reincorporated into Russia, that those lines would be frozen. And that territory the Russians claim that haven't yet occupied, will not necessarily be recognized as part of Russia. It will, in a de facto way, be part of Russia, but the Russians are not supposed to have troops in that area. Now, as I read it, now, if that's the case, the elements of the Russian military and the Russian nationalists are not going to be happy. They're going to say, well, why? What's the purpose of this? We've claimed this territory. We're fighting to get the Ukrainians out of it. So why should the lines be fixed with the Ukrainians still occupying some of this territory? And how come the territory we occupy will be recognized as Russia, but this other territory is some kind of a no man's land that doesn't belong to anybody? I don't know. There are pitfalls here, and it may well be that Trump will feel he has to give in totally to the Russian view, or it may well be that the attacks on him from the Zionists, neoconservatives, and the military security complex, and Lindsey Graham will kill the whole thing. There may be some Russian opposition on these points that I've made. Our money, our land, we're not getting it. How is this a victory? And they will be constraining Putin and his liberals. And then Trump will be up against the neoconservatives in the military security complex. So the whole thing may not fly.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just have to see how it plays out and who's the most desperate to get this over with. And for now, it seems to be Trump.
Yeah, I was listening to some Russian analysts and some government officials saying that why would they stop when they have the upper hand, and this could be a ploy for then for a small cessation of violence, so that NATO could then insert their troops as a buffer zone, as a tripwire, and they can keep the port of Odessa. And Russia has already signaled that they want all former Russian lands back. So why would Russia they would be snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory to accept this point now that the lines are collapsing. Ukraine is overstretched. Now even Zelensky is talking about negotiating. This shows us that things are really, really deteriorating rapidly. So why would the people on the winning side to pull Trump's foot out of the fire again after walking away from the talks in Alaska? Why would Vladimir Putin put himself in an even weaker position, because he's catching flack from people in his Security Council? And I did a show with journalist Eva Bartlett yesterday from Moscow, and it's pressure on Putin to hit harder and to take all of Novorussia. So if he capitulates, especially in this position, couldn't that put him in a tenuous situation in his leadership amongst the Security Council and his supporters?
Certainly among some of them, but you see, there are two groups. The liberals, the Atlantis integrationists, they're called. They want Russia reintegrated in the West. And his main negotiator, this Kirill Dmitriev, he's one of them. And so this is the intellectual class and the academics and the really rich Russians who have business connections in the West, and they want to resume those. And so you have that part of the population that don't care what Putin gives up, as long as Russia gets reintegrated in the West. And then you have the people who reason like you just presented, that why are we giving away victory? And I think with you, it would be a mistake for Putin to give away a victory or to create the feeling among the nationalist elements that he's done that, because the country with these Atlanticist integrationists, you can think of them as globalists. What is their allegiance to Russia as opposed to their business interests? See, so you don't have a strong country when you got that kind of people. It's the nationalists who believe in the country, believe in the people, the culture that gives strength to a country. And so alienating those people is a mistake. Now, who is the most influential? Well, in the beginning, it was the Atlantis integrationist. And as the war progressed, it became more and more the nationalist. But now that there's an opportunity for Russia to solve this under the appearance that it's getting security agreements from the West, which is what Putin wants. It's not clear how this will play out in the Kremlin, which side will dominate. So we'll have to see. And if the Russians sense that Trump is desperate for agreement, they'll be more firm in holding their position. If Trump senses that Putin finally gets some kind of security that he wants, then he'll be firm holding. How they will read each other, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. It's not a done deal. My friend Dr. O tends to see it as a done deal, but I don't think it's a done deal for these reasons we've just discussed.
And this would be like a smear on Putin's record from raising Russia up out of the ashes from the post-Soviet collapse. If he were to agree to these conditions, believing that the United States would honor its contractual agreements when they pulled out of every agreement, and they are the cause of all of these color revolutions in Central Asia and all around Russia's periphery. And for him to not seize Odessa, which to me is like unfathomable, because Odessa would then give him even more leverage, and they would have a land bridge to Transnistria, and they would not have to worry about a passage through Ukraine. I think that that would be too much to bear on his legacy and on his presidency. So I believe that he is in a position where he may have to, because we talk about Trump under pressure, but Vladimir Putin also is under a lot of pressure. And so don't you think that he is now in such a position where he has to take those territories, because under the Russian Constitution, remember, that they declared Kharkov and all of these other areas Russian territory, Russia, and they said that they would reclaim all former Russian territories. So isn't he under some type of binding obligation now, whether he wants to agree with Trump or not, to get Odessa, to get Kharkov, to go into all of these other areas that are have occupied by Russia and have occupied by Ukrainian troops, especially at this moment when the Ukrainian troops are buckling?
Well, I don't think Odessa was ever in the land that Russia claimed. You know, it's way to the west, so the southern western end of Ukraine. And I don't think it was part of what Putin reincorporated into Russia. I agree that he should take it, because then he controls the whole Black Sea coast. And I think he should also take Kharkov, because it was just traditionally a Russian city. And but apparently these are not territories that are claimed. They could easily take them, and I think they should. But I don't think at this point Putin will risk coming to an agreement, particularly after all the provocations he's accepted. He's held out, not reacted, accepted provocations, hoping to finally get some kind of security agreement that goes beyond the conflict in Ukraine. And that's what he's trying to use this for. And that's the pieces of this security arrangement are in his 31 points. So he's now got Trump apparently willing to give him essentially what he wanted. And so risking that is probably something he's not going to do. So, and this, it may well upset elements of the military or the nationalist forces. But I think for Putin, he'll see even an agreement that's not exactly what he wants as a step forward toward eventually easing the tensions of having NATO on the Russian border for such a long, from the Baltic down to the Black Sea.
Mhm.
And so I think he will do his best to go forward with this agreement.
I heard a a Russian general, talking about that they want to end this on the battlefield, and even I've heard Lavrov saying that this must be ended on the battlefield. They cannot allow this to fester over with partial deals with supposed security guarantees or whatever. I think if they take Kharkov, if they take Odessa, then Ukraine becomes a rump state because now it has no access to the ports, to the Black Sea. It becomes an economic burden, more of an economic burden on the European Union and the United States to then take care of this rump state. But so if he is a if he allows Kharkov and Odessa to stay on it, this will be festering over, and they'll start over and over again, and people will be mad at the blood that was shed um, over their soldiers to get to this point right here, and they would feel, but the Russian people would feel betrayed that they were almost able to take everything, even with all of NATO's backing, and then he backs out of this and say, "Hey, on good faith of the United States to pull Trump's feet out of the fire, that we're going to accept this deal." They've accepted deal after deal after deal after deal, and the United States, as Putin said, has shown that it is agreement incapable. So he would be putting himself at risk to accept this deal and putting Russia's national security at risk, because the United States will insert NATO troops there in a heartbeat under the guise of training and combat mission, all of this stuff. What do you believe that Putin is in a position to accept that, because he has an audience he has to cater to also?
Well, I don't know. It's like I said, Rashid, I don't know whether the people who want to be, whether the Russians who want to be reincorporated into the West will prevail in this, or whether the nationalists who reason the way you just presented, which I appreciate. I mean, that's the way I would see it also. It's not clear who will carry that argument. And it's not clear to me that Putin won't be so pleased that at least he gets this. See, from what Trump's done, it looks like a major concession to Putin. That's what it looks like. And so to have Putin turn his back on it or cold shoulder it or say, well, it's not enough, when he so much wants some sort of security agreement. And he'll see this as a step toward getting NATO off their borders. So I can't say that Putin will see it the way you do or I do for that reason. And so, but it may well be that Putin will have trouble with the two sides, And Trump will have trouble. He's got the MAGA Americans wanting the thing over with and him home. And he's got the military security complex and neoconservatives calling him a traitor for selling out an ally. You see, Trump's already being called names for selling out Ukraine. So if Putin is called names for selling out the war and giving up a victory, and I think in one of the points that really supports your view of this is, as I read it, the agreement that Trump presents allows Ukraine to maintain an army of 600,000 soldiers. Well, that's not demilitarization. So it may well, we'll have to see who. Does Trump insist on them having 600,000? Does he insist on not all of New Russia being recognized as such? If he does Putin accept that? Or does Putin say, well, this looks pretty good, except for these two items, they have to go? Is Trump feeling enough pressure from his supporters to say, all right, we don't know. We just don't know. The military security complex won't want to give up its enemy, and the neoconservatives will not want to give up their doctrine of hegemony. So how is American behaving in a hegemonic way when it gives in to Putin? So you see, I'm just telling you it's not just up to Trump or Putin.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them face two sides. You know, each, both Putin and Trump have people on the side of the agreement and people firmly opposed to it. So how does it play out? We don't know. I don't know. There's no way of knowing. We'll just have to watch it and see how it plays out. I think Putin wants an agreement and Trump wants one. And I think it's more important to Putin because he sees it as a foundation stone in getting a broader mutual security agreement that ends the whole West conflict with Russia, not just in Ukraine, but ends it. We go back to before the Cold War days. And he wants that badly. And Trump wants to get out of it and police his base. If he loses his base, he's finished.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not so clear that Putin would be finished.
But wouldn't it be like the difference between the two with their parties and the pressure is that this is an existential threat to the security of the Russian Federation. Think about right before the military operation, the British were building naval facilities in the Sea of Azov. We see they were drawing up plans. NATO was drawing up plans for the NATOization of the Black Sea, and then the reason for the Crimean takeover by the Russians is because the United States tried to supplant the Russian Navy in Crimea. And so for Putin to allow Odessa to remain, that would be headaches. I think also he would be under so much pressure that he would be close to losing major support amongst his base, amongst the nationalists, amongst the communists, the Security Council and the military industrial complex, because right now they are in the driving position. And it seems to me that even though Putin may want a an agreement, he has to look at all the factors of those things there. The United States walked away from every agreement that they had, every single agreement, if even going back to NATO not expanding 1 inch, and now to want an agreement so bad with the United States to ignore all of the previous Minsk 1, Minsk 2, and all of this stuff, and then for NATO to laugh about it. Yeah, we were just buying time to rebuild the Ukrainian army to do. I think they would oust Putin if he were to make such a foolish move like that, that would jeopardize the security of the Russian Federation.
Yeah, I'm not arguing against your view. I was just showing you that Putin had reasons for wanting an agreement, maybe as a building stone toward a bigger agreement. But to answer you, let me make this point. Since there's no reason for anyone to trust any agreement with the United States, as you made clear, why is Putin pursuing it? If he knows what you said, what's the purpose of having another agreement that won't be kept?
Mm-hmm.
Then why is he so willing to have negotiations?
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that he has accepted so many provocations and not responded with force is that he's holding out hope that he will finally break through and get recognition in the West that Russia's security concerns have to be accommodated. Otherwise, eventually it'll be a nuclear war. And I think that's why he keeps developing these super weapons, and he keeps waving them, saying, here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. This is what you will eventually face if you pursue this hostile policy toward Russia. So that's been sort of his position. I'm gonna take a lot. I'll take a lot of insults, provocations, because my hopes are you'll come to your senses, and I won't have to blow you up. and so I think Putin's interest in this agreement is high, and that it's more important to him, and in different ways, than it's important to the liberals, to the Atlanticist integrationists, who simply want to get their Western connections going again. And I think Putin's interest in this agreement as a building stone toward a mutual security agreement between Russia and the West that gets rid of NATO, no longer any need for NATO. I think that's his goal, and that's more important to him than the nationalists are wanting to have some kind of a victory. That Putin may see the kind of victory that they want as an obstacle to his long-term goal of getting NATO off Russia's borders. So I agree with you. All the risks that you said that he would be taking are there, but he may be willing to risk it because he sees a possible greater achievement at the end than a military victory. That's one thing, but it may queer his effort to get NATO off Russia's borders, because it'll give more power to the neoconservatives to Europe. See, victory. He's going to take more. Germany's next. And then that puts the brake on using an agreement as a stepping stone for a better agreement or a broader agreement. So that's just my explanation of how he could be reasoning and why he will probably try to keep this going forward. But I don't know. I'm just giving you all these possibilities, and I've tried to explain how both the Russians and the Americans have two groups, one in favor of the agreement and one opposed.
Mhm.
So you have all of that to play out, and then you have Putin's own view. Well, this isn't perfect, but it's better than we've ever had yet. Let's take it. It's a stepping stone. We'll be sure we keep our parts of it, and then we can raise the question of going further. Now, the agreement, all the points of the agreement that Trump has presented, it all is over if somebody doesn't keep each part of it. So this may not appeal to Putin, because all it takes is one wild card somewhere to not keep one of the points, and the thing falls apart. I'll have a better idea after I go through it very carefully and think about each one very carefully. I saw problems that could arise in some of these points, and it may be that whoever helped Trump drafted it so it would have problems.
Mhm.
In which case they defeat it or
Mhm.
hope to. You just don't know. But this is not just up to Trump and Putin.
Mhm.
Uh,
M Sparks, I want to thank you for the $3 super sticker. Vera, thank you for the donation also. Close before we close out. Can I just say something to you, Dr. Roberts? Could this be an elaborate scheme, like for Putin to show the world that we've offered to negotiate constantly? And he's trying to show his BRICS and Global South partners that, listen, we've been the rational partner. We've been trying to do this. We've been trying to do that. But every turn they've undermined us, and they've done this and this. So if we act aggressive from this point forward, we would have the political backing of the BRICS nations and the Global South. Could that be one point?
sure. I think that's very much in his mind. He doesn't want to lose what he's accomplished in building bricks, and that's very important. That keeps, you see, BRICS has stopped the ability of the United States or the West to isolate Russia or China. And it seems to have brought India and China together, or at least stopped their border wars.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think you're right, Rashid, that what you said is correct. This is a very important thing to Putin. And, China has, I think, made that point to him several times. Don't be aggressive. Um, so, other than the Russian nationalists, there's nobody really pushing for the kind of victory that you and I think he should take. My view is that if it's a Russian victory and they take Odessa and Kharkiv and they replace the government in Kiev and put their puppet in instead of ours, this this is another way of achieving his goal. I don't think Putin understands that, because it shows the West that, look, we can't mess with them. Look, we poured all this money and weapons in there. What good did it do? We simply lost Ukraine. So by showing that kind of resolution and determination, Putin may have a better chance of getting the mutual security agreement that he wants, because everybody says, well, he's not irresolute after all. He's not a coward after all. And the Russian military is not easily defeatable after all. Maybe we're making a mistake. If he wants peace, maybe we should give it to him. Because what if he does want Germany? We can't stop him from taking it. You see what I mean? This is the way I would play the cards. And I think the way you're inclined to play it, if we were Putin, but he's playing it the other way. I can't say which way is best, but I do think the way I just described has got just as much chance of succeeding. And it also saves Russia from all the perils of being reincorporated in the West. Because how can they be reincorporated in the West and still have BRICS? The whole purpose of BRICS was because they were being isolated by the West. So I think that Putin needs to think about it much more carefully than he has. I understand what he's trying to do and appreciate it and realize the humanity in it, and I see why he took all the insults, turned the other cheek and turned the other cheek and turned it, because he's trying to get somewhere more important. But whether it works remains to be seen, whereas a decisive use of force can have a big effect, because the West can't any longer fool themselves that they can deal with Russia militarily, and therefore they need to deal with it diplomatically and stop giving orders and sanctions and being coercive. And that's what Putin wants stopped. And whether his soft approach is better than a harder approach, I don't know. I just don't know. But it's the approach he's chosen. He's chosen the soft approach. And so that, I think, is the way it will proceed. Now, if the whole thing breaks down and they say, well, see, you got fooled again, then the soft approach is finished and it'll be the hard. So it's not like if this is being used or will be turned into a way of deceiving Putin again, it's not over. That just means there's no longer a soft alternative for Putin and the Atlanticist integrationists, and that it's an issue dominated by the nationalists, and it will be the hard approach. And it will be the end of Ukraine. Ukraine will be at best a rump state out there. And then the game starts again, like I say. Wow, we can't deal with Russia. We better make a peace.
But I think that when it comes to them, they don't understand that the empire is fighting for its survival, and they are trying to buy time through all of these agreements, after agreement after agreement after agreement, because the economic situation, because of the political situation, even the geopolitical environment is changing, as you stated, that they can't even fool themselves into that Walt Disney thinking that they can handle Russia on the battlefield anymore. So with that said, Dr. Roberts, as we close out, people accuse me of advocating violence when I am one of the people. No, I'm advocating common sense. I'm saying to you, if you and I are talking and I'm speaking Chinese to you, and you're trying to understand me, but you can't understand me, and I refuse to speak English, but you want to bring a point home to me, the common sense would tell you to, I need to bring this point to him. So let me learn a little bit of the Chinese language so that he can understand it. And this is what I'm saying with Russia. Russia has to understand the language of empire, and the language of empire is threat and force. And I'm not advocating violence. I'm advocating that that sometimes you have, if you're slapped, sometimes you have to slap back to stop the bully, because if you don't stop the bully, it will encourage the bully to continue to bully, and continue to overstep its boundaries. And what do you say on that matter, Dr. Roberts, as we
Well, I
close?
agree totally. I agree totally. That's been my point from the beginning. It's been my point from the beginning that Putin's refusal to put his step down has led to worse and worse provocations. And he's had to ignore more and more provocations, including an attack on the Russian strategic bombing fleet. He said, well, this isn't even an attack of war. This was a terrorist event. So I don't have to follow Russian war doctrine. So he's had humiliation after humiliation. He's accepted. And consequently, they got worse and worse. And like you, my concern has been that this will spiral out of control. And sooner or later, there's a provocation that's so big it can't be ignored. And by then, it'll be so late in the game, the Russian response has to be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to stop them at the beginning. You don't have to do much. But if you tolerate it for 4 years, as he's done, actually longer, depending on when you want to say this actually started, and they get worse and worse and worse, and you tolerate. When you finally put your foot down, it's got to be both of them in both fists to have any effect. And so I agree with you, and that's been my criticism of Putin from the beginning of this. And like you, I've been accused of wanting bloodshed. This Victor Orlov said, "Oh, Roberts is a bloody guy. He wants death and destruction." No, I wanted to avoid it by not letting these provocations spin out of control. And I wanted the war ended quickly before the West could get so involved that it could spin out of control. So your position and mine are the same. We reasoned about that the same. And I don't think it's fair of our critics to say that we want bloodshed. We're simply saying the way you stop bloodshed is you stop the provocations before they eventually produce massive bloodshed.
Mm-hmm.
This thing goes from a small conflict into a world war. That's when you have bloodshed. And so I think your position is sound and rational, and is certainly trying to avoid what eventually, if this continues, will be bloodshed on a large level. You you know those long range missiles that Trump was going to give them and Germany was going to give them. one of those things hits the Kremlin.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing Putin can ignore. He can't now say this isn't an act of war. What is he going to do? I mean, he has to then use real force, and that causes the war. So people, the ability to think has declined dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And the people to analyze, and what I've learned is most people don't want to think, and they go to websites or podcasts that tell them what they already want to know, what
Mm-hmm.
they already believe. They want it reinforced.
Mm-hmm.
They want what they think to be reinforced, and you tell them something different, they get mad. They get real mad. I wrote something the other day about the feminists, and I was using women who were criticizing feminism, pointing out how it destroyed men, women, the relation between them, the family, all of this. And I was just really reporting on what some women were saying who weren't feminists. And it was a podcast. And later in the comments, women said, well, when I heard this, I stopped listening. They didn't want to hear there's another side.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are a lot of people like that. And so you'll always be attacked by them. If you're not telling them what they want to hear, they're going to get mad and attack you. It happens to me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's what you have. That's the price of trying to deal with issues in an objective way. I mean, all your questions to me were objective questions, and you're trying to make sense of what's going on, and so that's legitimate. So that's totally legitimate. A lot of people are just preaching to the choir. They're not trying to get to the basis of anything. They're just trying to keep the people who believe what they believe believing that. They don't say, hey, let's look at this from a different point of view. So if everybody is caught in their own belief, then they can't examine their beliefs, then you can't make any progress. You can't make good decisions. There has to be objectivity. And I think that's what your program does. You're looking for answers. You get different people. They're probably different, probably other people you have tell you different things than I do,
Mm-hmm.
or have different responses. And in the end, people have to use their judgment, but they need to be informed. They need to hear all the different responses and interpretations. And then they can try to reach some rational, not emotional decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Putin has tried to keep emotion out of this. Instead of getting mad and striking back, he said, well, yeah, I can do that, but if I don't do it, maybe eventually we can resolve this. And so that's what it's come to. And not as I said, not because Trump came to that, but because his supporters forced him come home, deal with our problems, come home. So he can't just walk away from it. He has to. So how does he resolve it? He comes up with what looks like the Russian approach. And I think that both of them will do their best to go forward. But we've already talked about each side's got two warring groups. And presidents are not as powerful as people think. The organized interest groups who have a material interest in the outcome of decisions. The president doesn't. And this material interest is very powerful because it's money, it's riches, it's power. And they don't like presidential decisions that undercut their money, their power, their position. And so Trump's up against that. And the military security complex, they're not going to be happy to lose an enemy. And so they may look like they're going along with it on the surface, and they're going to be digging out the foundation under it the whole time. You know, I've seen this happen in my time in government. And the president often doesn't even know what's going on and who's undermining him. And you can have a president being completely undermined and he thinks they're his best friends. Really. And I assume the same thing can happen to Putin. So we don't know. We'll see. We can talk about it some more. I'm going to try to get my mind around it all before the weekend's over. And but we'll see how it develops. It'll be worth watching closely.
Yes, sir.
And there'll be all kinds of propaganda. There'll be all kinds of misinformation about what's going on. And it won't always be easy to know how it's playing out.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Roberts, thank you once again for joining me on the platform. And I appreciate the time. I appreciate the information. I told you I wanted to pick your brain, and we went over the time allotted for me, but you continue to go, and I'm really thankful for that. And closing, do you have anything to say to the people?
Well, yeah, to you, thank you for forcing me to think. It helps me before I get into all the material because I've already thought and I know what I've got to start looking for and all of that. And so I appreciate this interview. It's helpful talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roberts. I'll send you the video in about 5 or 10 minutes. You be blessed, be safe, and I'll talk to you, and we'll do this again soon after you get your head wrapped around everything.
Good. I'll look forward to it.
All right. Thank you, sir. Everybody listen, as I always say in closing out, do right by others, not because there's some material gain or some accolades to be had, but do right by others because it's the right, the humane, and the godly thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching you, God Almighty is watching you. And as my late, great, and wonderful mother would always say, God sits high on the throne of power, but he looks low. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, remember to stay righteous. And join us in about 30 or 40 minutes as we have Gregory Manarino on the platform. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. We're out of here. Peace.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a